Hello and welcome to April's book review. And yes, we are still here. We still cannot get to the bookshelf, which you may be able to tell is driving me a little bit nutty because I can't even put the books away, so I don't know how much space I've got and I want to go and buy books because the shops are now open. But I can't do that. April has been a relatively decent month for books, I think. I wouldn't say any of the ones I've read this month have completely wowed me, but none of them have massively disappointed me either. But I do have some opinions on them, so let's get right on into it. So the first book I read was The Unhoneymooners by Christina Lauren. Now this is a hate to love romancy contemporary kind of novel. It follows Olive and Ethan, who are the essentially maid of honour and best man at their sister and brother respectively's wedding. That wedding doesn't quite go to plan, so they end up on the honeymoon, thus coming together. I didn't realise that Christina Lauren was two people, one called Christina, one called Lauren, and that kind of intrigued me about how they came together to write the book, because it doesn't have multiple points of view or anything, it is just from Olive's point of view. And normally when there's multiple authors it's because they write a character each and they alternate chapters. So that writing process really does intrigue me, and I would like to find out more on how they go about doing it. I understand they've written a number of books together, so it must work, but I don't really understand how. It was a fun book to read. Obviously I'm planning a wedding, so the beginning of this is about Olive's sister and she's planned her wedding, or essentially won her wedding in a load of competitions, and it doesn't quite go as well as she intended. Let me just say I won't be having fish. If you've read this book you'll understand. But there was nothing overly special about it. It was very much a run-of-the-mill contemporary romance book. It's very much like a lot of the books I've read, just the setting is different, which is not a bad thing. I did enjoy it. It's just, I think now for a book to go to the upper echelon, I can't say it, why did I choose that word? The upper sphere of my book taste, there has to be something special with it. It was well written, The Unhoneymooners, and I did enjoy it a lot, but it was very obvious where the story was going and what was going to happen. Except for the one little subplot with Ethan's brother, who is not a very nice man. One of the bits I didn't like about this book was that the chapters were stupidly long. You may know if you've watched a few of these book reviews is I don't like long chapters. I like nice short chapters. 10 pages, 10 to 15 pages is perfect, because otherwise you just feel like you're reading forever and you're not getting anywhere. But I understand why they made these chapters long, because it was essentially a scene in a film kind of thing. So they had one location and that was the location for the whole chapter. So if there was a lot happening in that location, that was a long chapter. But yeah, not my fave. But it did have good points that other of these kind of books don't have. You find out what happens after they get together, which I appreciate because I do always want to know. And I do like elements of travel in my books, and they went to Hawaii for this one. But yeah, there are bits of it that I just didn't quite believe. It's supposed to be a hate to love kind of thing. They're supposed to be enemies. She says that he's her arch enemy and stuff. I just didn't really believe it. I thought there was just sort of a mild dislike there rather than complete and utter enemies. But yeah, I'd say The Unhoneymooners is a solid rom-com. There's nothing too special about it, but you will enjoy it if you read it. So there we go, that's The Unhoneymooners by Christina Lauren. As with the past few months, I then went on to a book on my Kindle and I chose to read the second Mary Poppins book, which is Mary Poppins Comes Back, and that's by P.L. Travers. Fun little fact, I'm quite the fan of Mary Poppins. As a kid I watched that video to death. Yes, VHS does age me somewhat. But yeah, I wore that tape out I could quote you the whole film, sing you all the songs, and if you haven't seen it, you'll know I got very excited when I went to see Mary Poppins, finally on stage. It's one of the last musical theatre shows I saw before, COVID. So if you haven't seen that video, I'll link it up here, but seeing that show made me very excited. So of course I'm going to be reading the Mary Poppins books. I have read the first one, I read that a little while ago now, and I now have the rest of the series on my Kindle, so I thought, why not give the second book a go? And the thing with the Mary Poppins books, that despite I know it's not Disney, and that Disney very much fluffified it all, it always confuses me, and I always get a bit taken aback when Mary Poppins isn't actually a very nice woman. She is very manipulative and it's not actually very nice to the children. And there's 4 children, it's not just Jane and Michael. So yeah, that does always take me a little bit of time to get back into and remember that it's not Julie Andrews or Emily Blunt, depending on which film you're watching. What I noticed with this book, now that I have obviously seen the musical, read 2 of the books and seen both films, is you can see at which point of which books they've taken for the 2, 3 genres, whatever it is. So there was a story about Mr. Banks's nanny coming back and she's not a very nice woman, and something about a songbird in a cage, I can't remember exactly what type of bird, which is in the musical. And then there's a story about the bowl that gets cracked, which is in Mary Poppins Returns, and that kind of stuff. So I quite liked, being the slightly sad Mary Poppins superfan that I am, seeing where they got the inspiration for certain parts of certain bits from. But Mary Poppins is a very short book, it's very easy to read. It's not continuous storyline, it's like little short stories of their trips out and stuff, and it's not quite as, fun as the films. Yes, Mary Poppins has their sort of seemingly magical abilities, but they're not quite as pronounced as they probably are in the film and stuff. But yeah, I enjoyed it, and I'll read the others in future months. That was Mary Poppins Comes Back by P.L. Travers. So the next book I got onto is a bit of another change of pace, and that was 13 by Stephen Cavanagh. I think I'm pronouncing. He's not even Stephen, he's Steve. But Steve Cavanagh. The reason I picked up this book, I do quite like thrillers, certainly sort of like murder mysteries and ones set in courtrooms and things. I also like that as part of my TV watching, so the 2 kind of come together in that. So I picked this up because I thought that the concept sounded fun. Essentially, there's a serial killer and he's on the jury of the trial of the murder that he's committed, which I thought could be quite fun. It's something different that I haven't seen before, so I thought, yeah, we'll give that a go. The book is split, which I didn't realise, into 2 points of view, so it alternates between chapters of Cain, which is the surname of the serial killer, and then the next chapter would be from the perspective of Eddie Flynn, who is the lawyer looking after the case. What I didn't realise as well when I picked up this book was that this is, I think, the 4th in a series. Some sort of Eddie Flynn series that I didn't know that was going on. So don't feel like you need to read the other ones, because I certainly haven't, and this made perfect sense to me. I'm sure if I had read the other books there would have been little bits in 13 that I would have picked up on more. Probably more about his personal life and stuff like that. That was mentioned quite a bit. And if I'd read the other books, maybe I would have got the context of it a bit more, but it really didn't matter very much. So I was in 2 minds with this book, it has to be said. The Eddie Flynn chapters I really enjoyed, and I was getting really into the story with them because he was investigating the multiple crimes of Cain, and how it was all linking together and things like that. And also I enjoyed reading about his sort of ways to question the witnesses and stuff that were in the court case. That I enjoyed a lot, and if it was all of that, I would have really enjoyed this book. But they've interspersed it with these chapters from the serial killer, and they just slowed the pace right down, and I didn't like them at all. I think this book would have been better if you didn't know that he was on the jury. I think it would have been a better twist if you found out he was on the jury and then had another twist of the twist that is actually in the book that I did quite like and I didn't see coming, just to make this more of a shock factor, I guess. Because we knew he was on the jury, it did just slow it all down, and I wasn't a fan of that at all, and it really did get on my nerves, to be honest. There were parts of this that I didn't think were particularly original, certainly around some of the characteristics of the serial killer. I thought they were a bit of a cop-out, to be honest, but I did like the motive of why he does all the murders. That was clever. And right, this is going to sound like a contradiction because I said I didn't like the long chapters in this book, but this book had chapters that were too short. I feel like Goldilocks. I need my chapters to be just right, because unlike the Unhoneymooners where you read loads and you don't feel like you're getting anywhere because you're not getting through any chapters, with 13 you feel like you've read loads because you've read about 4 chapters but you've only read about 8 pages. I like a happy medium, alright? But yeah, this did get better as it ramped up to the ending. Certainly when it took half the book to get to the trial and things like that, and the fact that half the chapters slowed the book down, it was going to get a lower rank on my story graph than it actually did in the end, because it did pick itself up a bit, I'll give it that, but it wasn't quite the exciting murder courtroom book that I was anticipating. So that was 13 by Steve Cavanagh. So the last book I read, again on Kindle, was Coraline by Neil Gaiman. I picked this book because I wanted something short, because I knew I needed to get this video filmed and I didn't think I was going to quite have enough time to fit in a normal sized book, which is probably not the best reason. Coraline is one of Neil Gaiman's children's books. We'll get onto my thoughts on that in a minute. And I wasn't entirely sure that I wanted to read this. Right, I'm going to go on a bit of a tangent here, bear with me. Neil Gaiman is an author I know lots of people love. His books have never particularly interested me. I have read Stardust, which is one of my favourite films. Like, I love that film, I think it's brilliant. But I wasn't a big fan of the book. I don't know what it was about the book. It's a while since I read it, but I remember being a little disappointed because the film is, like, excellent. So when it came to reading Coraline, I again was a bit like, well, wasn't a big fan of Stardust, but we'll give it a go. I have a couple on my Kindle. I got a lot of books sort of free or very cheaply, and they're all sort of authors that I thought, I might read that one day, basically. But on to Coraline. This is a children's book, supposedly, but I think if I read this as a kid, I would have had massive nightmares. I know I am a chicken. I have an overactive imagination and I am a big wimp anyway, so there we go. But it's not a children's book. How can it be a children's book? It's not pleasant, it's creepy. It has lots of things. It has dead children. There was a trigger warning. All of that stuff. How is that aimed at kids? I have seen the film, but the only thing I remembered about that was that, you know, the other mother had buttons for eyes. I didn't remember a lot else, to be honest. So I don't actually know whether I enjoyed it or not. It was well written, and there were bits of it that I thought were clever and made me smile. Like the cat's personality, I thought that was spot on. The fact that Coraline threw shade at having pineapple on pizzas amused me. But I guess because I thought it was supposed to be more like a fairy tale, I thought there'd be a more pronounced moral in it or something like that. I don't know. I really can't work out how I feel about it. The concept of Coraline is that she moves into a new house and she finds this random door that has a brick wall behind it because it's like a big house that's been essentially split up into flats. And then another time she goes to the door and there's a corridor which she goes down and she finds her other mother, who is the woman that has buttons for eyes. Turns out she's not very pleasant, not a very nice woman, the other mother. And Coraline's way of getting away from the other mother I think was very clever. I liked that concept a lot. But there are way too many questions I have left over from that book, such as who is the other mother? Why does the other mother want Coraline? Why does the other mother want to sew buttons in Coraline's eyes? Why is the other mother stealing children? Lots of questions that are never answered. And I think that's probably where I'm torn. I can't work out my feelings on it. There was a bit in the copy that I had where Neil Gaiman wrote about the book and his writing process and his thoughts and stuff like that. And he was saying that it is a kid's book and children think it's an adventure but adults think it's a horror, which I kind of agree. Maybe if I read it when I was younger I would have seen it in a different light. But as I said, I probably would have found it far too frightening as a kid. I know this is a very vague and not a very good way of ending a video, but that was Coraline. A book I'm not sure what I thought of. So there we have it. That was April's book review. If you've read any of the books, as always, let me know what you thought about them in the comments below. Always love to hear what you think, and if you have any recommendations for me, also please pop them down below. If you've enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up. If you haven't already, please go ahead and subscribe if you fancy it, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!